Hello everybody, my name is Noah Rich and today we are going to be talking about the history of Nintendo handhelds. So, with Nintendo, we go honestly way back. I always had, the first console I had was the GameCube, and this guy means a lot to me. I've always loved the GameCube, and then when I was in kindergarten, we got the Wii, and that was revolutionary. It was crazy because I remember doing my kindergarten homework just to run home to play the Wii. And I always was good at school. Well, tried to be. Just to play the Wii. And that's how much, legit, the Nintendo has really impacted my life. After we got the Wii, then we got the Wii U, and then we got the Switch. So, I've always had, since GameCube and up, had Nintendo in my life. And for handhelds, I've started out, I got the DS Fat, which we're going to talk about a little bit, and then I got a DS Lite, and then so on. And I just always have loved Nintendo's handhelds. So with Nintendo, way back, they started out with making these little game machines called Game & Watches. And Game & Watches really started out in 1980 with the first Game & Watch ever to be created was called Ball. And you had this guy that was juggling a bunch of balls, and he has like this, and he's like standing, and then he throws balls in the air, and it's legit just a dude juggling. But it was so addictive and sold so well, Nintendo started making more and more Game & Watches, and I luckily have this one right here, which is the Mario Bros. Game & Watch, and it is pretty freaking awesome. So one of the Mario's on one side, Luigi's on the other side, and you go up and you push cakes through one side of the conveyor belt and it comes out the other side. And then you go all the way up top with the cake and put it on the truck. It's a really fun game, and honestly, they are addictive. Then, after making a bunch of Game & Watches, they released the Game Boy in 1989, which was revolutionary for the time because this thing was really cool. I do have a cracked screen on mine. It needs to get replaced. But it was really cool. This thing is pretty heavy too. It can play your average Game Boy games. It does have a headphone jack. And it's got D-pad, A and B, start and selects, power switch. It's got a contrast one. So when you're playing out in the sun and different things, you can mess with the contrast wheel to turn it up and turn it down. I know it's kind of hard to see in my cracked screen. But now you can see the square where the Nintendo logo should be. I never had a Game Boy until recently, but I honestly do really like the system. The thing is, though, this screen, let me grab a game real quick. One second. Is, as you can see, trying to make it easier for you. It is really hard to see, to be honest with you. I know I got a cracked screen, but it is hard to see. With you got sun beaming on you, got a dude walking next to you, and you got that glare, and you cannot see it in any direction except straight on, really. And you got to have that light to help you out. Yeah, it's really hard to see, and it makes everything very difficult. Then later on, in 1996, they made the Game Boy Pocket. Now, this is just a shell for a Game Boy Pocket, but the size differentiation is huge. They call it the Game Boy Pocket, which is pretty much like calling the DS to the DS Lite. It's so much, it's just a shell, so obviously it's lighter, but it is really lighter. I'm taking mine apart right now and cleaning it. That's why I just have the shell. But when you're comparing this huge brick to this, in size, is crazy different. Now, it does pretty much, yeah, it has everything a Game Boy has on a Game Boy Pocket, just very minimalized. And yeah, it's crazy seeing, look at the difference in that. So I've always liked the Game Boy Pockets. They are legit. You can legit slip it in your pocket, but you do have to have a screen protector because sliding stuff in your pocket over and over again would just scratch up the screen. Then after that, in 1988, they released the Game Boy Color, which is pretty cool for the time. It still does, though, have that screen just like the Game Boy. And with the reflections, as you see, as I'm moving it around, I got my lights set up, but it is like right now you can't really see it. Now you can kind of see it good, but then like any other angles, it's really hard to see. And that was a big complaint because this was 1998, and it went through 2003. So imagine playing this thing in 2003. It really wasn't that ingenuitive at the time because 2003, this guy was around, and this guy's awesome. Like imagine like looking at a GameCube graphics and then looking at things on this. I know it's a handheld and it has to be very condensed compared to the size of this, but still, it's crazy how that happened like that. So next, we have the Game Boy Advance. Now, I do not personally have a Game Boy Advance, which is kind of crazy, which I'm going to be getting one soon. But I'm showing you a picture right up there, what it looks like. I do like how the shape is like that. It is a lot more comfier to hold in your hand. I have played with one before. They are very nice systems, but once again, the screen is just like the Game Boy Color. And the Game Boy Advance, the original one, was up to 2009. And that's crazy. Like, they make Game Boy Advance games up to 2009, which is crazy by itself. But then they released the Game Boy Advance SP, which its screen, as you can tell, definitely does have a light. But it's not bad, but in certain angles, it is really not that nice to look at. You have to really just be straight on, and it just looks great. But if you're at angles like that, it's really not that pretty. This was released in 2002, which it was good for the time, but the one thing this doesn't have that the original Game Boy has, that this doesn't have, is a headphone jack. Like, come on, Nintendo. Now, there is this attachment you can buy that you can plug into the charging port that has a headphone jack. I mean, this is pretty small, so I understand a little bit why you couldn't throw a headphone jack in there, but there's room all... Like, come on. And that does drain the battery a lot faster, I've heard. I haven't tried it myself because I don't have that attachment yet, because they actually are a little pricey. But, like, that's the only really complaint I have with this system. But besides that, it is a great system. Now, you can turn it on like that, but you can press the button, and you can make it, if you're playing in sunlight, like those old screens with no backlight. So yeah, as you can see, like with nothing, you really can't see anything. But then, not a lot of people know about this, but on the back of the Game Boy Advance SP, there's this little model number right here. You're not going to be able to see it, but it's right up here in the top text, the top line. It says model number AGS-001. Now, if it's AGS-001, you're going to have the screen that's like this. That's kind of, it's all right. But they made a hardware revision where it's the back of this one, it says AGS-101. These are the ones you want because, as you can tell, if I can turn it on, the screen is a lot brighter. And there's different angles. I know that was the light from that, but you can still see the screen from those different angles. Now, there's this brightness button right here, and that with the other one has it too. You press it, it even gets brighter. Now, this does drain your battery pretty quick, but if you're next to an outlet or close to one, which mostly when you're playing games, unless you're on the go, you do have an outlet nearby, this screen is freaking amazing. Now, these are harder to come by, the AGS 101, so if you do see them for cheap, make sure to pick them up because they're great systems. Now, these do play Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy games, which is awesome. But yeah, just always look in the back, look for that 101, and if you see that 101, make sure to grab it. So next up, we have the Game Boy Micro. Now, it was released at a weird time. It kind of was just, it was in 2005, and it was kind of just like, why does this exist kind of thing? It can only play Game Boy games, which was kind of, only play Game Boy Advance, which was kind of a setback, because this that they released can play Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, but the Game Boy Micro can only play Game Boy Advance. It is definitely a lot smaller, but I mean, I have held a Micro before. It's really not that much different in weight. So, I don't know. I'm going to show you a picture of it. And, I mean, they are kind of cool. I do want one, but they can only play Game Boy Advance games. Also, another thing I forgot to mention was in 1998, sorry, we're going out of order a little bit, only in Japan, they released this little system. This isn't it, but this is the Game Boy Pocket. It's the same size. And it says Game Boy Lite right under here. And it has a backlit screen. Now, the screen isn't much to go home about, but it's still, in 1998, that Japan had a backlit screen. But all the way up to frickin' 2003, the US didn't have crap. Like, what the heck, Nintendo? Come on. Nintendo also did create these little handhelds that were probably about like that big, honestly. I have seen them before. They're called Pokemon Minis, and they're little Nintendo handhelds which just have a D-pad and two, like, I think it's A and B buttons. And it was really made for the Pokemon craze, because everybody liked Pokemon back then, and they still do. Trust me, everybody likes Pokemon. I don't know why. I do. There's nothing against Pokemon fans. Don't come at me, but I think it's a little overrated. That's just my opinion. Okay? But they did make that, and I'm going to show you a picture of it. Those are actually pretty expensive, and they are pretty small. So if you do see them at garage sales or something, or an estate sale or flea market, definitely make sure to pick those up, because you can easily make money on that. Next, what was released was the Nintendo DS. Now everybody asks me, why is the Nintendo DS called the Nintendo DS? The DS stands for dual screen, because it has two different screens, which makes sense. Now, with this was very revolutionary for the time. Now, the Game Boy Advance SP did have that clamshell design, but not a lot of people had the SP. I mean, the SP it definitely did sell good, but the clamshell design really was big with the DS. Now, this one does have a broken hinge. I have not yet to fix it, but with the clamshell design, when you drop it, it definitely does protect both those dual screens and the system, but it probably does break that hinge. But overall, this system is great. It was released in 2004, and it was a great system. And Reggie Fils-Aimé released the freaking DS, and the way he did it, if you have some spare time, watch the DS launch. I think it's at E3. If it released in 2004, I think it's E3 2003. Reggie Fils-Aimé, dude, I love that guy. He's so cool. He's done so much for Nintendo. And just watch that, how he displays it, and it's really cool. That's a cool video just to watch, just throwing it out there. Then after the DS, they made the DS Lite. And the DS Lite is definitely lighter. It's way thinner when compared to the DS Fat, as they call it. I'm trying to hold it up straight. It definitely is thinner, and it's just a lot more compact. Everything you have on here, you have on here. Just like the Game Boy to the Game Boy Pocket. Everything you can do in the Game Boy, you can do in the Game Boy Pocket. Everything you can do in the DS, you can do on the DS Lite. So, like, we're going to go over it. You can play Game Boy Advance games with the DS Lite still, which is really cool how they offer that. But you can't play Game Boy Color games on it, which does kind of suck, but we're talking about games that were made really long time ago, and trying to play those on a system still up to date. It's understandable why they don't still have that backwards compatibility. Alright, now it's picking up the pace. We have the DSi. It was released after the DS Lite in 2008, and it has pretty much... Okay, the cool thing about the DSi that I always liked is the big thing about it is it does have a camera here, and it has a camera in the middle spine right here, which is very cool. I do like the system, and surprisingly a lot, this system I've always never really found a broken hinge DSi, which I say that and somebody might find one. I mean, it's possible, but I feel like this one's definitely more sturdy in that standards. But with this system, it's got everything. It's got the D-pad. It's got everything that a DS Lite has. But it gets away that Game Boy Advance slot. So on a DSi, you cannot play Game Boy Advance games on it, which does kind of suck. But it's 2008, and that Game Boy Advance was released a while ago. So I mean, like it's understandable, but I guess it cuts down on cost too to add that in. Now, I did forget to mention this. They had this thing called the DS Browser, and it was for the original DS and the DS Lite to browse on the internet. I think it's kind of cool. I just have the case. I'm not lucky enough to have it. I just got the case for free. And it is kind of cool, but with the DSi, before that you couldn't get on it, but with the DSi, it has it already built in, and you can get on internet, and you can get onto YouTube. It has a cool online. It's just like the menu is a lot cooler compared to the original DS and DS Lite, and it's cool how it offers different stuff. Now after the DSi, they had the DSi XL. Now this thing is a behemoth. The screen is huge. Now, like in the name, obviously DSi XL, it is pretty much the same thing as a DSi, just XL. Now this does have like a matte finish, and it's like very like kind of like a matte kind of color, and it feels kind of like a hard plastic. But the thing I don't like about the DSi XL is it's got fingerprint heaven. Like every time I wipe this thing off and then go playing with it, it just looks like a big fingerprint playground. And that's the same thing with the Wii U gamepad. Just everything with that gloss on it, you're going to put your hands on it. This thing's called a handheld. Don't put gloss stuff on there to make fingerprints look like crap. And also, it can go over the camera too. Which, I mean, yeah, you can touch the camera on that one, so I guess I'll let it slide. But this screen is freaking huge. Now, with the DSi, I never really got into it too much. But the thing is that, yeah, it does have different menu options. I'm trying to make it focus a little bit. Oh, it's got the DS camera on. Which, that's one cool thing the DSi can do, is take pictures. But they're really not that good a quality if you go to it compared to today's standards. Which, I mean, what do you expect? It's that. Then they released the Nintendo 3DS. And the big thing about the 3DS was the 3D. Now, the 3D was pretty cool. I gotta admit, when I heard the 3DS, I was like, holy crap, that sounds awesome. But after watching videos on it, like, the 3D was cool. I mean, I've seen it before. It's like, there's a little slide bar on the side that you can slide down and up to see the 3D effects. And you can turn it off if you don't want it. But the thing I was really worried about was the games. And the 3D effect, really, you don't need it. So I got a 2DS XL. So they released the 3DS. Then they released the 3DS XL, which was exactly like the DSi to the DSi XL. I know it's kind of confusing. Just try to follow along with me here. So they did 3DS to 3DS XL. Then they released the 2DS. And now I do have a 2DS, but the screen is broken actually. With the 2DS, it is flat. It doesn't have that clamshell design. It goes back to like a Game Boy Color, which it doesn't have that clamshell design on it. So after they did the 2DS, they did the new 3DS, which you're like, what? What's so new about the new 3DS? Like, legit, the name is New 3DS. Which you'd be thinking, like, why would you be calling the new 3DS? And then you got the new 3DS XL. I'm not even joking. There's a system called 3DS XL. There's the 3DS XL, the new 3DS, the new 3DS XL. Like, what the crap, Nintendo? Just make one console. Make maybe two. I understand why they made the 2DS, because it was originally selling for only like $100 for like holidays and like birthdays. If you got a grandma that's kind of cheap, she's probably going to get you that 2DS that doesn't have that 3D functionality. Which I think the 2DS, you still got a system that could play the 3D games and the original DS games, which I did not mention. So with the 3DS, it has 3D games. And those 3D games cannot be played on original DS, obviously. But the DS games can be played on any 3DS or 2DS, which I thought was always cool. Then they had the new 2DS XL, which I have here, which is the last technically one they released. And it's honestly a really nice system. The cool thing about the 3DSs is they have this circle pad right here. And it is really nice when you have your thumb on it and you're just moving it around for when you're playing games. I really do like that. But the thing is, though, you have games like Luigi's Mansion on the 3DS that are 3D, like platformer kind of games. And you need that extra stick. So what Nintendo said, okay, I'll just super glue an eraser onto the system and just call it another stick. Now this does actually work quite well. I mean, if you guys can't see that, it's legit just a nub. And it feels like the top of one of those cheap pencil erasers. Now what the heck, Nintendo? If you're going to throw one of these nice smooth guys on the side, you got to throw another one over here. Just drop this down a little bit lower. Like, you could have done it. Just do two. Why? Like, if they made a new system that had both of them on, like, both of the circle pads on each side, I might actually consider buying that. But they did release this attachment that goes on to only, I think, the original 3DS. Not the 3DS new or the... Dude, I can't even keep up with it. But that had another circle pad, but it made it huge and just... I don't know, this gap of 2011 through 2017 of this 3DS crap was kind of crazy. Nintendo went a little crazy with it. But after the 2DS, the new 2DS XL, they released the Nintendo Switch. The Nintendo Switch is, I don't even have to talk about it because you guys already know all about it. It is great. But technically, it's not, I mean, it is a Nintendo handheld, don't get me wrong. But I would say the Switch Lite would be technically considered a Nintendo handheld because it can only be played in handheld mode. So that's what I have to say about Nintendo handhelds. I kind of just went through the history a little bit. I do love all of them. There's not really one that I don't like, but you don't ever really see me going to play on this because of those screens. If I was to play a Game Boy game, I would probably grab my 101 and play it on it because this screen, once again, is freaking awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions about Nintendo handheld systems or just about me or anything else, feel free to leave a comment down below. And just leave a like if you like the video and maybe consider subscribing. I will talk to you guys tomorrow. See ya. Smile always.